Hello and welcome to Death with Deity. I'm your host, Jason. This podcast is dedicated to talking about death and the dying process and disability as a Christian believer. Here with me is my father-in-law, Steve, who is suffering a terminal diagnosis with brain cancer and undergoing treatment, and he's doing radiation and chemotherapy currently. In the last episode, we went over the stage called denial, the first of 5 stages of grief and loss as defined by harvard.edu. And today we're going to be going over anger. So harvard.edu defines the anger stage as, quote, once a person comes to understand the information they received and accepts the reality of a death, they often experience anger. Anger can be a natural response directed toward oneself, family members, doctors, God, or even the deceased. Anger is a normal part of the grieving process, though it may seem hurtful or offensive to loved ones. Often, anger is just a manifestation of grief and can present itself in various ways. For example, blaming a medical doctor for not preventing an illness, blaming family members for a lack of care or support, feeling anger toward God or a higher spiritual power, feeling angry with oneself or blaming oneself for the death, and experiencing a short temper or loss of patience. So, Steve, I was wondering, we talked a little bit about this before actually recording. What have you experienced as far as the category of anger? I know frustration was something that came to mind. Maybe you could share some about what has changed since your brain surgery. Obviously, you were diagnosed with a brain tumor and they did emergency surgery. They had to take out not only the tumor, but some of the surrounding brain tissue. And that has obviously, whenever you mess with somebody's brain, that has clear implications, but I don't think our audience necessarily knows or can tell from you speaking here. You don't have an obvious slur and there's not large delays, but maybe you can kind of communicate to them the big changes that affect you in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things that people have been surprised with, at least in the medical community, my clinical team of people that I have around me, is how well I have done since the surgery. And for me, I always think that they're just being kind, because I do feel a little different at times. And so I was like, well, you're just trying to be nice. What's really...
trying to be encouraging.
Yeah.
You're doing great, Steve.
Exactly. Being positive.
Right.
You've just told somebody they have terminal brain cancer.
But we want to sweeten it a little bit.
We want to make them feel better.
Sure.
In the time that they have left.
And that's understandable.
Yeah. And so part of me wonders about that. And so I've noticed some changes. And I think what was hard in the beginning was... what were those changes a result of? I was told that there was a lot of swelling on my brain, and some of it from the growth of the tumor pushing the brain up against the skull, some of it a result of the surgery and just the natural swelling that went on from that. And so I should expect some changes in my behaviors and abilities and things of that nature. They mostly seem concerned about the physical. So do you have strength on your left side, because it's your right side that was impacted?
Right.
So, how's your left side going? Do you have any numbness? Things like that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really have physical things that I notice, but I do notice that I have other issues, and some of that is just feeling constantly overwhelmed by too much information or too much stimulation. If there's too many people having a conversation around me, or children screaming, or TV playing loud in the background, things of that nature, just can become, I guess the best way to describe it is overwhelming.
Sure.
It's not that it's just annoying. It's overwhelming. And so one of the things is I was thinking about the subject of anger is that I haven't really experienced anger per se. I haven't been angry at anybody or anything during this process, but frustration definitely. And the frustration has really come around the context of my limitations. So
Sure.
where I used to be a manager in business and handle a lot of things
Right.
at any given
Juggling
time,
a bunch of different stuff.
people coming up to me, working with a team of 40 or 50 people and literally getting bombarded with questions constantly while I'm in the middle of working on my own projects.
Sure.
And being able to field questions and handle all this what you would call multitasking. And then all of a sudden, getting to a place where if I'm going to sit down and have this conversation with you, I can't have any distraction.
It needs to be pretty much silent.
Yeah.
And obviously, we weren't recording a few minutes ago, but you were trying to read some scripture on the computer, and the dog barked just once, and you paused for about 3 to 5 seconds just to get back to where you were. So it's that level of the train gets derailed really quickly.
It's like the brain can only function with so much, so much bandwidth, I guess. I've used that phrase quite a bit with people. It's like, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. And one of the things I learned recently with my final post-op appointment with my surgeon was that the part of the brain that they had to take out the biggest chunk of, where the cancer was most deeply rooted, was in my right parietal lobe. And so my first question to him was, well, what does that part of the brain do?
Because, what's its job?
Because obviously I can stand, I can walk, I can talk, I can do a lot of things. I can even still read and understand and regurgitate what I'm reading and understanding. So what did this part of the brain do? Because obviously it's not there anymore. It's not doing anything. And he explained that ultimately that's part of your brain where all the input and stimulation going on around you comes into play. Your brain discerns the information and makes decisions about it. So I need to respond to this stimulation or this input, or can I disregard it? How does it fit on the priority scale? And he was specifically stating that in an example is that if I were to drive, where I would have to be careful, because how I'm impacted by the loss of that portion of my brain is that if I look in my rearview mirror and I see a car coming up behind me, normally in a normal situation with somebody who's got their right parietal lobe intact, you're going to be thinking about the fact that car is back there while you're paying attention to everything else going on around you. Cars coming off of side roads, cars braking ahead of you, a red light, that you're going to have to slow down for, all these things. And maybe a dog running out in front of traffic, or a ball, coming across the street.
Yeah, any number of things.
All that input. And but in my case, what'll happen is my brain will focus on one thing and one thing alone, and it will disregard everything else.
It might not be the most important thing.
Exactly. And so in my particular situation, I might forget that I saw that car coming up behind me, have no memory of it at all. And so to a real degree, my short-term memory is affected. I may not, because of when that memory would have been formed, was in the middle of a lot of other distracting input.
Yeah.
It never
got flushed.
It never formed. And so that explained a lot of things to me, because I'd been really feeling a lot of that for a while, where I was struggling to just be involved with too many things going on at one time. And I felt like I was really thriving when I was alone in a quiet setting, and I could be doing a lot of things alone. But as soon as I was around too many people or too many other distractions, dog barking, all those things, all of a sudden my ability to retain, process, and accomplish tasks became much more challenging. And so that's where the frustrations would come in, because I would feel like I couldn't be effective anymore. It took me longer to do everything, and so I would get frustrated with myself because I just couldn't do things even half as good as I used to do them before.
Sure. I imagine since it was being able to focus and multitask was so integral to what you've done for a living, and as a man, what you do for a living is very integral to your sense of worth and self-identification. I imagine that has the potential to be far more frustrating and crippling than it would be if it affected some other part of your life or function.
Yeah, I think so. I think when, again, I'd been a manager for over 30 years, one business or another, and that was just a requirement.
Yeah.
And
baseline.
It's just what you had to be able to do. You couldn't be a good manager if you couldn't have a lot of things going on around you and still be effective, and still being able to perform at the same level regardless of the circumstance. So you might have people asking you different questions, and for each person there's a different level of intensity, but you have to be able to process it all the same way.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that could be. It was a big change for me to get to a point where I still retained a lot of my cognitive abilities, but that area of handling too much at once, that's kind of gone now.
Yeah. And that's not related to the swelling. That's related to what they cut out, so it's not coming back.
Yeah, there's no way to ever rebuild that.
that.
Yeah, it just if I live another 6 months, or if I live another 5 years.
I mean, even being miraculously cured of the cancer itself, that would still.
Yeah, this is my new reality.
Yes.
And I think that in and of itself is another thing to have to try to learn. You go from the, hey, you're a normal everyday person experiencing life, to you've got this tumor that carries with it this terminal cancer, don't know how long you're going to live, to now you can't process things as quickly as you used to, or even at all in some cases, depending on all those circumstances going on around you at any given moment.
Yeah.
So it's a new layer of I think surprise and shock and frustration and challenge.
Yeah. So do you find that have you struggled with any frustration towards God for having this big change in your life, or is it more just frustration in the moment of being feeling like your hands are tied in a way, or feeling helpless? And how have you coped with that, or how would you advise others to cope with that? Because there's a lot of people out there who are new disabilities are not an uncommon thing.
Yeah,
we talked a bit before about there's obviously a large variety of different disabilities. Somebody could lose their leg, or and they have to. You're having to learn to now live with a different body, basically.
Exactly.
And so are a lot of people. And that would be frustrating for anybody to almost start over in just learning how to function the body that they live in. and I know you're still kind of early in this journey, so I don't, not necessarily looking for like some polished answer, but where are you starting to go? Where would you be inclined to go as a believer in dealing with this high level of frustration and just acclimating to your new reality?
Yeah. And again, I think there's no easy answer with that. I think you initially asked if there was any frustration with God for allowing something like that, and there wasn't. I don't think I ever stopped and thought, well, Lord, why are you doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only have you, robbed me of maybe a number of years of life, right? To feel that kind of way towards God, you're taking time away from me, but now you're also going to hamstring me in the years that I
Have left,
in the
yeah.
time that I have left. And and while I might have thought about those things in the context of that reality, right? The reality of, wow, I don't have much time left on earth, and now I'm slowed down because
Mm-hmm.
of this disability. I never thought, well, why would you do that to me, Lord?
Yeah.
I always came back to the point of, what is it that you're trying to show me? What does he want me to learn? Because I'm constantly reminded in Scripture, and I think if you read the Bible enough, you don't have to read it from front page to back page to get this. But God's good, and God is definitely good to his people. And so if these things are happening and these are just realities for me, there's something good in them. And I may not understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder if, like, even with my disability, if I'd have the ability to comprehend it, because it might be too difficult for me to process
Sure.
physically anymore. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for any of that. I think it's just remembering that there is somebody outside of myself that I can look to for hope, that I can believe is in control, and trust that regardless of how I might feel frustrated, or I might feel disappointed, or I might feel overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
that he's there and that he cares for me. I think that's the big one, is that he's not a God who sits afar off and is just observing or orchestrating events in my life. And then it's just all about him and his glory. But his word says that he cares for us. And so he can see my struggles. And I think about, we've talked a lot about David, and about how David often in the Psalms wrote out about him crying out to the Lord, just feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And maybe frustrated, maybe terrified, maybe beat down.
Yeah.
I think,
soaking his couch with tears.
yeah,
Just really vivid imagery of
yeah,
somebody being in anguish.
I was going to say that,
I always
a
get the
deep
impression he was
anguish.
on his knees, almost just screaming
Yeah,
out of pain.
yeah, exactly. And but David is a great example to us, because as an example, in Psalm 28, he says, "To you, O Lord, I call, my rock, Be not silent to me. One translation says, be not deaf to me. So that silence is a sense of not hearing and not responding. And he later on says in Psalm 28 that blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield. And so I think David is a great example for people like me to look to when we're feeling frustrated and when we're feeling a little bit helpless. We're feeling a little... We've gone from being these warriors who went out and
conquered.
Yeah, did big things, you know, and always doing them in the power and strength of God. You know, I don't think David ever looked at himself as being the one who defeated Goliath, but
yeah, he gave credit where it was due.
But he reached a point where now he's feeling overwhelmed and he's feeling out of control, and he's not confident that he's going to be able to survive these circumstances going on around him. And so he calls out to God. And so for me, that's, again, there's no anger in it. It's just frustration and feeling helpless. It's probably what it is. Like I can't fix this thing on my own. There's nothing I can do. I can't change my diet. I can't get this surgery. I can't do whatever.
Can't regrow the brain tissue.
Yeah, I can't pop a pill. And so because I can't do anything about it, I just have to accept it and learn to live within that new reality and trust in the God who has created me and who has sustained me all these years, and believe that his plan is a good plan, and that he won't take me through this time and leave me alone, but he's with me and he's leading me. And so I can have confidence in that.
Thank you, Steve. This has been Death with Deity, and we thank you for listening. If you have found this helpful, we would really appreciate it if you shared this episode, shared this podcast. If you are interested in more material from Hyper Premium, which is the digital media company that produces Death with Deity, you can subscribe on our Substack page. If you have questions or comments, you can email me at jason@hyperpremium.co.